Good morning. Welcome. I had the pleasure of ringing in September, on September 1st, and now I have the honor of ringing it out. With the chiming of our Peace Bowl, we affirm our collective hope for peace. We acknowledge that these lands that we love are the ancestral lands of the Yavapai people. Please enjoy our gathering music. Beautiful. Thank you, Lena. Thank you all for being here today, both in person and on Zoom. Welcome to Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I am Deidre Schwartz, your worship associate today. We extend a warm welcome to all and hope this day finds you with a spirit of joy, optimism, and well-being. This is the mission statement of our congregation. We are a compassionate spiritual community that celebrates diversity, nurtures the personal and spiritual growth of all ages, shares our gifts, promotes justice for all, and serves the world we live in. Please join us after service for coffee and conversation in Davis Hall, or for those on Zoom, please join the breakout rooms that Martin will invite you to as service concludes. If you are joining us for the first time, please check out our website at prescottuu.org for more information about us. And if you are here in person, there will be time to introduce yourself at the end of service, and then please stay and chat with a member or two over coffee, tea. We'd like to thank our pianist, Lena Hubin, our Sunday manager, Lila Witt, our Sunday greeters, Jane Keene and Rhea Batterman, Martin on AV, and our wonderful kitchen staff for their outstanding hospitality. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you, Karen Denny, who's going to lead us on a couple hymns that I understand might be a little new to some of us, so thank you for that. Now would be the perfect time to check your phones to make sure they are in worship mode. In addition to the announcements that we're showing on the screen before service, you can read about other things happening at Granite Peak in the weekly Peak newsletter on our website, and we have some printed copies of the announcements at the welcome table. Sandra Pelosios, Our Faith Development Coordinator is teaching ages 5 and older across the street at our Faith Development building. We begin our service in the Unitarian Universalist tradition of lighting the chalice. Our chalice lighter this morning is Russ Erickson. As he's lighting the chalice, I have this reading. We light our chalice as a symbol of the light within us and the life that flows through the world around us. It is our beacon as we search for truth. It is the warmth in our hearts for love, and it is the energy that propels us to action. May we be kindled by our time together. Okay. Now we've got the opening hymnal.
Opening words.
Opening words. Yeah. Sorry about that. I knew it this.
Something's opening. My colleague Anita Farber has written, "Welcome, friends, today to a day of hope and promise, to a place of peace and comfort, to a journey towards truth and justice, and to a community of love and courage that will help us along the way." And let's stand as you're able to do so and sing our opening hymn, number 346, "Come Sing a Song with Me."
I think this one is familiar. It's the one at the end that's not. But hopefully, let's sing with joy. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home. But hope is hard to find, and I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring us and a rose in the winter time.
The words to our covenant. This is a version of a covenant that was originally written by James Vida Blake, who was minister in a couple churches in the Chicago area, including the church I served for 8 years, the Evanston Unitarian Church. He wrote this in about 1890, and it's been revised and changed over the years. But in Evanston, because it came from a previous minister, they would say it every Sunday, standing, and then at the end of it, I would say, please be seated. And I remember the story of a woman who said, my daughter was looking at the order of service, and she says, well, it doesn't have all the words in it. And her mother says, yes, it does. And the daughter says, no, at the end, the Reverend always says, please be seated. It's not here. So please be seated and let's join in our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community. Thus do we covenant together. Joys and sorrows.
The heart of Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist congregation is our cherished community. As we experience a time of meditation and music, we will take a few moments to silently acknowledge the joys and concerns of our hearts and of our minds. If there is an event which moves you to a joy or concern, hope or gratitude, I invite you to come forward silently and drop a pebble from the dish into our communal water as an affirmation of our connection to one another. May all our joys and concerns surrounded by the healing communal water of our beloved community be acknowledged here today. So may it be. Please sing along to Spirit of Life. Words are in your order of service and on the screen. As we prepare to take the offering this morning, we recognize and appreciate the connections and community that we have here each week. This congregation and its wide array of services and programs are supported by your generosity. We also give back to the greater community through our Seeds of Support program, and this month's recipient is our very own neighborhood food pantry. Please read about them in your order of service. To give online, the link is available in the chat, or you can also go to our website. Please enjoy the offertory music that Lena is going to play, which was selected in honor of the spectacular moon views we've had recently. I hope you've had a chance to see this glorious moon out there. The moon shadows were stunning. Enjoy Lena playing Moon Shadow, composed by Islam Yusuf, also known as Cat Stevens. We acknowledge the generosity of spirit you have expressed through this offering. What you have given in love is received in gratitude. Blessed be.
Thank you for helping with the service as the worship associate and for that lovely music. Thank you so much. The poet Carl Sandburg was born in 1878. As a child, he attended the Galesburg, Illinois Swedish Lutheran Church with his family. He wrote an autobiography, and in a chapter called Judgment Day, he described a memory that illustrates the predestination theology held in the church and the impact that it had on his family. Carl Sandburg wrote, "After dinner, the talk slowly shifted to the sermon of the day. Slowly, the talk got around to where the preacher had so solemnly told us Nobody knows for sure who will be among the saved on that last day. It might be you, it might be him or me. There would be loved ones separated, some going to the blessed happiness of heaven, others to everlasting fire. And then, not slowly, but suddenly, everyone at the table was in tears. Down our cheeks, the tears ran, and we looked at each other. It had never happened before in our house. We had seen the mother cry once or twice, and us children blubbering plenty of times, but never the father. This was the first time we had seen tears in his eyes and running down his face. We children looked out of the corner of our eyes. No one was either ashamed or proud. Had we not heard that loved ones would be torn apart on that last day? My feeling one moment was that my mother looked at my father and believed there was no certainty that he and she would not be separated on that last day. No one could tell. The matter of the faithful and the faithless would not be clear up until the last day. So we wept. In unison, we wept. Slowly we gulped and choked down the sorrow that had come suddenly, the sorrow that arose out of that mystery of what the judgment will be on us in the last day. Now, Sandberg goes on to say that there was one religious group in Galesburg, Illinois, that did not agree with predestination theology. Sandberg wrote this about this strange religious group. Mama spoke in hushed tones about the Universalists. I was 8 or 9 years old when I asked her about them. She shook her head with a grave face. She gave her ideas about the Universalists in 2 short sentences. They say there is no hell, and they believe in dancing in the church. On the first point, I found out that she was correct, and that the Universalists were saying there is no hell. On the second point, I learned that she had been listening to Gabmouse. I came to see later that most of the preachers in town spoke from their pulpits against dancing, either square or round, while the Universalists said little or nothing about dancing, either in church or out, claiming only that since there is no hell, you couldn't dance your way to hell.
Good morning. We are fortunate to have a special guest with us this morning, the Universalist minister, Reverend Hosea Ballou of Boston, Massachusetts, has agreed to join us today in Prescott to answer a few questions. First, I want to thank you for being here with us today, Reverend Ballou.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. I've visited many parts of the northeastern United States over the years, but until now, I've never been anywhere near Prescott.
I must say, Reverend Ballou, given that you were born 253 years ago, you are in remarkable shape.
Yes, isn't it amazing?
Reverend Ballou, I am hoping that we can take the opportunity of your visit to learn about you and your involvement in the first years of American Universalism.
Well, nothing would bring me more delight. I was born April 30th, 1771, in Richmond, New Hampshire, the last of 11 children. My mother died 20 months after my birth. My father was a Baptist minister, and we lived on the small fees that he would receive from preaching and what we could raise on our farm. I did not attend school. My father taught me to read and write. Birch bark was my paper and coals from the fire were my pencils. By the time I was 16, I could read the Bible. We all worked the farm, and for fun we had sports. I was a good runner and a skilled wrestler.
If your father was a Baptist minister, how is it that you became a Universalist?
Well, my father taught the Calvinist belief that God would elect some people to go to heaven when they died, and that God would condemn others to everlasting hell. When I was growing up, I heard this theology constantly. However, you must remember that this was the time of the American Revolution. The King of England claimed that God elected him to rule. As a child, I saw the revolution reject the king's claim and replace it with a democratic government. Simultaneously, people began to question the idea that God ordained only a few persons to go to heaven after death. I heard these discussions, I heard the questions that were being raised, and they fitted in with my own feelings. I had no fear of the divine wrath of God. So when I was 20, after careful study and thought, I came to believe in universal salvation. I came to believe that all of us go to heaven when we die. It was my own reading of the Bible more than anything else that convinced me of these things. One day I was reading and my Baptist father came up and asked, "Is that a Universalist book you're reading?" I answered yes, without hesitation, and I showed him the book. It was the Bible.
How did you become a Universalist minister?
Well, all of us were farmers in New Hampshire, Vermont area, but we also worked in the church. My father spent most of his life as a preacher, and 3 of my older brothers had taken up the cause. They urged me to preach. In the Baptist tradition, clergy had no formal schooling, no divinity school to attend. Ministers learned by doing, by apprenticeship. With no experience, in 1791, at the age of 20, with the encouragement of my older brothers, I agreed to try preaching.
How did you do?
I'll never forget the occasion. My face flushed, my throat went dry, and my knees shook. Sweat covered my forehead, and it rolled down my cheeks. I announced my biblical text, and I read it through. Then I looked up to begin the sermon. No words came. I could not speak.
What happened?
Well, one of my brothers in the congregation had to come up, lead me away from the pulpit, and then come back and give the sermon himself.
How did you feel?
Oh, I was depressed and discouraged. Still, my brothers and my friends pressed me to keep trying. Little by little, my confidence grew. I gradually developed a style of preaching without using a manuscript or notes.
Did you serve at church?
Well, not at first. In the winters, I made a small living as a school teacher, and in the summers, I was an itinerant preacher. I wore homespun clothes, and I tilled a small plot of land to grow my food. I traveled on horseback, and I spoke in meeting houses, schools, barns, orchards, and people's homes. You should realize that during this time, there were only two popular forms of entertainment that existed: hymn singing and preaching. There was no TV, no internet, no professional sports to watch. Hymn singing and preaching was the form of entertainment. Because I spoke in many different surroundings and situations, I developed an ability to argue. I learned how to debate and to persuade. In my sermons, I used the language of farmers, and I illustrated my points with stories of the land and of the people.
May I ask you a more personal question?
Sure.
I'm sure the members of this congregation would like to know something of your family life. Would you share something with us about your marriage?
I'd be happy to. Ruth and I married on September 15th, 1795. She was 17, I was 24. Ruth, she had clear blue eyes and flowing light brown hair. Our marriage lasted 55 years, and we had 9 children.
I understand that you began to develop your Universalist theology. When did you break away from the ideas of other Universalist preachers?
Well, by the time I was 28, I had concluded that Jesus was a great human being, a special human being, whose teachings we should follow. Yet I could not accept the idea of the Trinity. I found no evidence in the Bible that Jesus was God. Instead, I came to believe that Jesus was a special messenger of God. Also, I became convinced that no such things as hell or the devil existed. It seemed to me that the references to hell in the New Testament were about life we lived here today. Hell is the pain that we suffer in this life before we die.
So these two ideas, that the Trinity did not exist and that there was no hell, must have pushed you at odds with the other Universalists?
Well, yes, when I was starting out, now most Universalists accepted the Trinity. They also believed that sinners would go to hell for a time and then go to heaven. They believed in hell, but only as a temporary form of punishment, a kind of purgatory. Hell was a jail where God would give people sentences of a few months or a few years, depending on the seriousness of their sins. I said that punishment for sin occurred in this life, and that when we died, a loving God immediately welcomed all of us into heaven.
By the time you were 28, you were a guest preacher at the First Universalist Society in Boston. I have heard that you got in trouble for expressing your views about Trinity and hell.
Well, indeed I did. John Murray, the minister, went away on a trip. He asked me to fill the pulpit. Murray was the founder of the first Universalist church in America, and the church members held him in great respect. Although Murray was away, his wife was in the congregation. She hated my sermon. As I concluded my words and was giving a final prayer, Mrs. Murray sent a note up to a choir member in the front of the church. Just as I was about to announce the closing hymn, this man arose in the choir loft and announced to the congregation, "I wish to give notice that the doctrine which has been preached here this afternoon is not the doctrine which is usually preached here in this house."
What did you do?
I said simply, "The audience will please take notice of what our brother has said." Then I announced the hymn. Later, the parish committee apologized for the incident.
Well, you also faced more serious opposition to your universalism from the community.
Indeed, I remember when we held our general convention in Woodstock, Vermont. The county had granted us the use of the courthouse for our meetings. But when we arrived, the sheriff planted himself, sword drawn, in front of the courthouse door. He intended to keep out any persons so depraved that they believed in universal salvation.
What happened?
When we arrived at the front door, all I could think of was a similar incident that Jesus had faced. So I looked at the sheriff and I quoted Matthew chapter 26, verse 52. "Put up again thy sword into its place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword." Well, the sheriff was stunned to hear the words of Jesus addressed to him. He lowered his sword and allowed the Universalists to enter.
I find it interesting, Reverend Ballou, that throughout the early years of your ministry, you never held a full-time position. You were constantly on the road, traveling from one church to another. When did you and your family finally settle down?
Yeah, churches can be difficult. In 1809, when I was 38, the members of the Universalist Church in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, called me to serve as their minister. It was my first full-time settlement. I found the experience different from circuit riding. Preaching at a different church every Sunday meant that I could say what I thought and then move on. Serving the same church month after month, year after year, meant that I had to deal with the politics of parish life. Over time, some people came to dislike my ideas, my style of preaching, my personality. The congregation could not raise enough funds to pay me. At the annual meeting, some of the church members attempted to cut off my salary. In 1815, I went to serve a church in Salem, Massachusetts, and there I experienced many of the same problems.
Well, those must have been very difficult times for you and your family.
Yes, when I left Salem, the church owed me nearly a year's salary, which they never paid me. It was a joy to be in Boston. The Second Society of Universalists had built a spacious brick building with seating for almost 1,000 persons. I preached there 3 times every Sunday without a microphone, 1,000 people. People took practically all the seats in the morning. In the afternoon, many people were standing in the aisles. And in the evening, the aisles were completely packed with people.
Why were you so popular?
Well, because the message I proclaimed was that God loves us and that we need not fear God. Universalism is a religion of the working people that does not seek to cast fear, hatred, and suspicion into the world. Something we always need, a positive religion. Universalism is a religion for farmers and laborers who do not wish to divide, separate, and exclude people. Universalism is the religion for common people who do not wish to deny hope, joy, and dignity to human beings by condemning them to hell. The power of this message drew people in.
However, didn't your popularity also have something to do with your skill as a preacher?
Well, the language in my sermons was the language of a farmer. I talked about a loving God in a way that working people could understand. One Sunday, I told the story of a little boy who heard his parents say that the Universalist preachers approved of sin. They told the child that the only way to prevent sin was to threaten people with eternal damnation. Finally, the child gained permission to attend a Universalist meeting. When he returned home, his parents asked him if he liked the preacher. No, the child said. The boy swore that he would never go to the Universalist church again. For you told me that this minister would let me commit as much sin as I pleased. But he says more against sin than our own minister does.
So, was this the major criticism of universalism? Without fear of hell, people would feel free to sin.
Yes, Calvinists thought that without a belief in hell, people would do whatever they really wanted to do. Steal, lie, commit adultery, get drunk, refuse to work, and so on. In the words of one Universalist talking to a Calvinist, is that what you really want to do? Steal, commit adultery, and get drunk? I preached that if people committed these sins, they would suffer in this life. I taught that sin created unhappiness in this life. I believed that the happiest people were the people who did not sin.
How did you get along with the Unitarians?
Yes, I noticed you're Unitarian Universalist in your name. I'm sad to say, back then, the Universalist ministers, they snubbed me. Theologically, they were ambivalent about hell. Universalists were of a different social class. They were snobbish. They were aristocratic. Their ministers were Harvard educated. They were contemptuous of unlearned Universalist clergy. The Universalists called us crude and vulgar. I must admit, this rejection saddened me.
Well, how do you feel about the fact that in 1961 the denominations merged?
Well, I'm delighted. I'm also happy that the Unitarians no longer teach that hell exists.
Well, I'm afraid we are nearing the end of our time here this morning. To sum up, what do you think you accomplished during your life?
Well, when I died in 1852, I could look back on 80 years of living, 60 years as a Universalist preacher, 55 years of marriage, and 9 children. When I began my ministry, we had only a dozen Universalist clergy in America and less than 1,000 members. At the peak, in the 1830s, the Universalist Church was the 9th or 8th or 7th, depending on who you ask, largest denomination in the United States, with churches throughout New England and the Midwest and even into the South. I helped free thousands of working people from their fear of God.
Before you depart, Reverend Ballou, are there any final words that you would like to leave us with today?
Well, as I look out at the world of the 21st century and compare it to the 19th century, I see, of course, many, many changes. Today, most Protestant ministers have adopted some form of my message. On your television, you can watch smiling preachers with blow-dried hair announce that God loves you, and so do I. Well, when I preached, I don't think anyone cared whether I loved them or not, but they desperately needed to hear that God loved them. Today, just as in the 19th century, educated, financially secure people, well, they don't worry a lot about whether God loves them. If you have a comfortable home, a good job, a healthy family, then the question of whether God loves you or not is not so important. A Universalist minister named Thomas Starr King put it this way: Universalists believe that God is too good to damn them. Unitarians believe they are too good to be damned. But I ask you, take an imaginary trip. Try to leave this comfortable environment of the Prescott Unitarian Universalist congregation, the Granite Peak congregation, and travel in your mind to religious communities meeting right now just a short drive from here. In many other congregations, you can still hear the hellfire and brimstone sermons of Calvinism. These men and women need to know that God does love them. They do not need to have preachers frighten them out of their wits by visions of everlasting torment. They have enough real fear and real pain in their lives. They need to know that there is no hell. This is the message of universalism. Now, I understand you're going to sing the closing hymn, and we're going to get help in learning it because you don't know it very well. Is that true? Faith of the Larger Liberty, 287. It's really a lovely hymn. You're going to enjoy it a lot.
Written in the fifth. Okay, is it working now? The hymn tune was written in the 1500s, so it's a very, very old hymn tune, but the words are more modern. We have our beliefs and our view of the world in the words. So pay attention to the words and enjoy the old plodding hymn tune. Lena is going to play it all the way through. Some of you that grew up in other churches might recognize this tune. be, all bondage notwithstanding. Faith of the free, by thee we live, by all thou givest, and shalt give our loyalty commanding. Heroes of faith in every age, causing self-denying, wrought and increasing heritage, monarch and creed defying. Faith of the free, in mighty name, the costly heritage we claim, the living and the dying. Faith for the people everywhere, whatever their oppression, of all who make the world more fair, leaving there to faith's confession. Faith of the free, whate'er our plight, thy love and liberty, their light, shall be our blessed possession.
You sounded great. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you. Now we take an opportunity to welcome visitors who are here for the first time. Now, some people come to the church for the first time as introverts, and they do not want attention drawn to them. I'm one of those people. So if you are like me, visiting for the first time and not wanting anybody to notice you, you don't have to raise your hand. On the other hand, about half the population is extroverts, and they love to say, here, look, I'm here. So if you're here for the first time and you'd like us to acknowledge that by welcoming you, raise your hand and shout out where you're from. Anyone here? There's a hand. Where are you from?
I'm from Phoenix.
From Phoenix. Welcome. Good to have you. All right.
I live here.
But you live here. Good choice. It's very hot in Phoenix. Anyone else? Yes, where are you from?
Me, I'm James. I'm from Michigan.
You're from Michigan. All right. Well, welcome. Good to have you. People like Michigan. Anyone else? And again, if you're visiting and you don't want to raise your hand, that's fine. We are still glad you're here. I'm going to be in the coffee hour area after the service. If you want to talk to me, I'll be happy to. And of course, if you're a regular here, please welcome the folks who raised their hands and said they're new. It makes them feel part of the community and feel better about being together. I have closing words, and after that, Rick, you have an announcement to make? And I will go to the back of the church while you're making that announcement to greet people and hear their comments about the service. This is a reading that's in the hymnal. You don't have to say it, though, but if you want to find it, it's number 700. For all who seek God, may God go with you. For all who embrace life, may life return your affection. For all who seek a right path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step.
I just wanted to bring you a little up to date on plans for the creating a vaulted roof in this building. One thing that I think is very important for people to realize is that adding the vaulted roof, originally the idea was to place new trusses on the existing brick walls. It turns out there is no reinforcement in those walls, and so they will not support the new trusses. However, we have identified an architect who is very experienced at designing and renovating large structures and has come up with a very simple solution of building relatively simple walls that would essentially occur within the current walls and would in fact support those. And it is basically a fairly straightforward and not particularly expensive way of dealing with the issue. So the main thing I would like to tell you is that the project team has been working diligently and has recommended to the board that we engage this architect, and in fact the board has approved that unanimously, and as of Friday, I believe, Thursday or Friday, we have in fact engaged this architect to come up with the very specific and detailed design about how actually to construct that. So we are really moving forward, and we're very optimistic that we're going to be able to do what we had intended to do. Thank you.